Conventional wisdom says that angst and anger is not the best way to make art. However, in one case, in the case of Miles Davis in the mid-60s, it was. Last week I recorded a version of the Miles Davis jazz standard 4. It's a really fascinating song for a couple of reasons. Firstly, Miles probably didn't write it. Eddie Vinson is widely accepted to be the actual author of the song. Despite that, Miles is credited on pretty much every recording as the sole composer. Miles Davis has a history of songs that are misattributed, both ways, in fact. Blue and Green, Solar, Tune Up, or even Donna Lee, which he claims to have written, well, it's credited to Charlie Parker. But the story of 4 is even more interesting than that, and the part that I alluded to in the introduction took place in the mid-60s at the Lincoln Center in New York City, and it was backstage where Miles Davis and his band of what would have become the legends of jazz in the next 50 years, Herbie Hancock, Tony Williams, among others, he said to them, we're going to play this one for free. Miles Davis was driving a Ferrari at the time, whereas his band were in their late teens or early 20s, and they weren't so happy about playing the gig for free. The reason Miles Davis was talking about playing it for free is because it was a voter registration event. Martin Luther King had just been killed a couple of months before, so it was unofficially in his memory. So they get up on stage and there's this outward hostility. What ends up happening is they record this furious set of jazz standards and originals from Miles Davis, playing really aggressively, fast, loud, but in a way that wasn't bad. It was good. In fact, the performance gave us 2 of Miles's most acclaimed live albums. My Funny Valentine, which was all the ballads all combined into one album, and 4 and More, which was all the fast tunes. So this is an occasion where that hostility was directly responsible for this unique and incredible performance. The point of this is not to justify Miles's art monster behavior. What it does show, though, is that art and people and the relationship between them is complex. Miles wasn't necessarily wrong to want to do the gig for free. I think most people would agree that that would be a reasonable thing to do in the circumstances. He probably was wrong to tell his band the way he did. But at the end of the day, the song 4 is a fascinating tune, and it's one worth checking out. So let's head back and check out my arrangement and just have a look and see some of the elements that I think are really fascinating about this song. So here's the project for my arrangement of 4. There's 2 drum parts. One is an electric drum kit and one's an acoustic drum kit. With various different pieces of percussion, a series of synthesizers as well as the guitars. Other than that, there's really just the organ part. I'll play a little bit and then just talk for a bit. You can check out the actual song itself to hear it in full. Here, that bass part is a Jupiter synth clone by Arturia. So obviously not the sort of sound that you would hear in a traditional jazz record, but plenty of synths like this were used in fusion and plenty of funk music throughout the 70s and 80s. So not really that out of place. And then the synth a little later on is another clone. And this synth in particular this clone is of the CS80, which was like it was the Blade Runner synth essentially. So if you've heard Vangelis's soundtrack to Blade Runner, that's what that synth is. I had the idea that it was sort of like an electronic big band arrangement. Actually, I'll just play these figures. With that in mind, I made the 2 lead synths play this little backing figure, which I'll just play isolated for a second. And the idea of that was to sort of sound a bit like, your trumpets or your brass sections in a big band playing behind the soloist. So in context with the solo.
it just adds a little something in the back end of the solo. So have a quick listen to this bridge, and I'll talk about it then. So this bridge goes between the guitar solo and essentially the drum solo, which, full disclosure, I was actually lazy and just pulled in a bunch of MIDI loops from an Easy Drummer library, and so that's what makes up the drum solo. The bridge essentially is just a series of suspended chords that I really liked on the organ, and the melody is switching between this sort of harmonic minor style riff. It's got a minor third in the middle there, which gives it that sort of eerie, ethnic sound. Switching back and forth between these really cheesy little lines, which I quite like, because it means you get to play cheesy lines without it sounding too cliche or too cheesy. It also serves for a really cool outro, which I guess if you were going to play this arrangement in a live scenario, you might do another set of solos on an outro and just jam on it for a while. That's what I'd do anyway.
There is one other aspect of the story of Four which is worth telling, and that has to do with the real book, which was a collection of lead sheets, which are one-page versions of songs, that was published by the students at Berkeley in the mid-60s, and it was extremely illegal at the time. It has recently become more legitimate thanks to a couple of publishing companies actually getting the rights for the songs that are included. But initially it was photocopied, it was sold, and the problem was a lot of the chords were wrong. For Four, the chord in the fifth bar was particularly egregious because the song itself goes to an F minor 7. The F minor 7 doesn't represent what we would call functional harmony. It doesn't lead from one chord to another in quite the expected way you might. But Eddie Vincent and Miles Davis were quite a fan of shaking things up a little bit. Trouble is, they ended up transcribing the wrong chords, and for quite a long time they stayed wrong and they were performed wrong, and it was only the 6th edition of the real book, which is the Hal Leonard accurate version, that the chord was fixed.
Let's look a bit closer at those chords. The original transcription of this song is this, and it's incorrect. So it opened with an E flat major 7, which is correct, but then went to a B flat minor 7, E flat 7 to an A flat major 7, and then after that went to the A flat minor 7, D flat 7, and then E flat major 7 again. And I've just made a version of this song with me playing very simple chords on guitar along with the synth playing the melody. It sounds okay. That last chord sounds a little bit odd to me, but maybe that's because I'm used to these the actual changes more so. It sounds okay, and you definitely understand why that set of chords would have made sense to the Berkeley students who originally transcribed it. Have a listen to the chords just by themselves. Forgive my really basic playing, but they're nice sounding chords. The thing is, that's just not what was on the original record. What was on the original record was what's out of the current real book, and ignore all the scribblings because most of it's actually wrong. The chords starts on an E flat major 7 as the old ones did, and then it's the E flat minor 7 rather than a B flat minor 7 that goes to an A flat 7, and then you have an F minor 7, which is, I guess you could call it a bit of a breath of fresh air because the F minor 7 is not expected. It is in the original key of E flat major, but it's just not what you would expect to play immediately after an A flat 7. Then this chord is the G minor 7, which was incorrect in the old version. Have a listen to that with the melody. So that last chord, at least again to me, sounds much better than the original one. These chord changes, I mean the changes themselves, in fact let's just listen to them isolated. Still sound wonderful. They sound less cohesive or traditional. I mean, that is the technical term that you would use. They don't represent the same functional harmony that the incorrectly transcribed ones do. But this is the great thing about jazz and music in general, is that breaking the rules is what creates these interesting ideas. So let's just listen to that one more time because I want to. And let's listen to the original version that was transcribed incorrectly. So original transcription, which is incorrect. I mean, aside from that last chord sounding a bit off, it definitely sounds cheesier, right? And it sounds cheesier because it's more traditional, using that functional harmonic and now approach to voice leading. The upshot of this is really just to make sure you're playing the right chords. Listen to the original recording, if this is assuming you're a musician. Listen to the original recording and make sure it's right. That's it for now. If you'd like to hear this version that in full that I've made, then check out the link in the description. Subscribe if you'd like. I imagine I'll be putting out more videos in the future.